On a quiet Tuesday morning, 3 black SUVs rolled slowly into a narrow street lined with zinc roofs and roadside shops. The convoy stopped in front of a small tailoring shop with a faded blue signboard. Men in dark suits stepped out first, scanning the street like they were guarding something important. Neighbors peeked out of windows. Children stopped playing football in the dust. Nobody understood why such powerful men would come to this part of town. Then one of the men walked toward the tailoring shop and asked a question that made everyone go silent. "Is there a woman here named Adaeze who fixes wheelchairs?" Nobody in that street had ever seen anything like this before. And what happened next would change Adaeze's life forever. But to understand how it all began, we have to go back 3 days earlier, to a woman who had nothing, yet still found something to give. Sit back, relax, and let us walk through this story together, because sometimes the smallest kindness opens the biggest doors. Adaeze was 26 years old, and she had been sewing clothes since she was 16. Her shop was barely the size of a small bedroom, with one sewing machine that made a strange clicking sound whenever it got tired, 2 plastic chairs for customers, and a small mirror with a crack running down the middle. The roof leaked whenever it rained, and she had learned exactly where to place her bucket so the water wouldn't ruin the fabric she was working on. She rented a single room not far from the shop, the kind of room where the walls were thin enough to hear your neighbor's radio, and the landlord, Mr. Okonji, never let anyone forget who was in charge. Adaeze's mother had passed 3 years earlier, and her father had left when she was a child, so she had learned early how to survive on her own. She paid her rent in small amounts whenever she could. She ate one proper meal most days, and she kept a notebook where she wrote down every kobo she spent, because in her life every kobo mattered. Every morning, on her way to open the shop, she passed the old bus stop near the market, and every morning she saw him, an elderly man, maybe in his late 60s, sitting in a wheelchair that had clearly seen better days. One of the wheels wobbled badly, the leather on the seat was torn, and the brakes barely worked. He wore the same faded brown sweater most days, and he sat quietly under the small tree near the bus stop, watching people pass by. Nobody seemed to notice him. Traders walked past without a glance. Children sometimes laughed at the way his wheelchair squeaked. Even the women who sold food nearby never offered him anything unless he had money to pay, which most days he didn't. Adaeze noticed him on her very first week of opening that shop, almost a year ago. She didn't know his name then. She just knew that every single morning, he was there alone, and every single evening, when she closed up, he was still there, as if waiting for someone who never came. One evening, as she was locking up her shop, she saw him struggling. The wobbly wheel on his chair had finally given out, and he was stuck, unable to push himself forward, unable to call for help that anyone would actually answer. She watched for a moment, telling herself that surely someone would help him, but nobody stopped. People walked around him like he was a piece of furniture left on the street. Something in her chest tightened. She locked her shop and walked over. "Are you okay, sir?" she asked gently. The old man looked up, surprised that someone had actually spoken to him. "My wheel," he said, his voice tired and rough. "It just stopped working properly." Adaeze knelt down and looked at the wheel. She wasn't a mechanic, but she could see the bolt had come loose and the rubber on the wheel was completely worn through. "I think I can fix this a little just so you can get home tonight," she said. She didn't have proper tools, but she had a small wrench in her sewing kit that she used for adjusting machine parts. She tightened what she could, and the wheelchair became stable enough for him to move, even if it still squeaked badly. "Thank you," the old man said, looking at her carefully. "Most people don't stop." "I know," Adaeze said quietly. "I'm sorry about that." That night, she could not stop thinking about him. The next morning, she brought a small parcel of food with her to the shop, just rice and stew wrapped in a polythene bag, the kind she would normally eat for lunch. She walked over to the bus stop before opening her shop and handed it to him. "I don't have much," she said, "but I thought you might be hungry." The old man's eyes filled with something that looked like both surprise and sadness. "Why are you helping me?" he asked. "You don't even know who I am." Adaeze smiled gently. "Does it matter? You're a person. That's enough for me." From that day, it became something she did almost without thinking. Every morning before opening her shop, she would bring a small portion of whatever food she had and share it with the old man. Some mornings it was just bread and a sachet of water. Some mornings it was a little more. It wasn't much, but it was something, and it was consistent, which made all the difference to a man who had grown used to being invisible. She learned that his name was Adaeze, though she suspected it wasn't his full name, just what people called him. He never spoke much about his past. When she asked where his family was, his eyes would grow distant, and he would simply say, "That is a long story, my daughter. Not for today." Patience, the senior tailor who worked alongside Adaeze in the shop, did not approve. "You are wasting your money on that old beggar," Patience said one morning, watching Adaeze prepare her usual small parcel. "You can barely pay your own rent, and you're feeding a stranger every single day." "He's not a stranger to me anymore," Adaeze replied calmly, continuing to wrap the food. "You have a soft heart, Adaeze, but a soft heart will keep you poor," Patience said, shaking her head. "Charity does not pay rent." Adaeze said nothing. She had heard this kind of talk before, and she had learned that some people simply could not understand why anyone would give when they had so little themselves. But she remembered what her mother used to say before she passed. "The hand that gives, even from little, will never truly be empty." Weeks turned into months. The wheelchair's problems continued. The wheel Adaeze had fixed temporarily eventually wore out completely, and one rainy evening Adaeze sat stranded under the tree, completely unable to move, soaked from the rain that had caught everyone off guard. Adaeze found him like that on her way home, his sweater soaked through, his hands trembling slightly from the cold. "Baba, you cannot stay out here like this," she said, alarmed. "The chair will not move, my daughter." "I tried." She looked at the wheelchair. It was beyond a simple fix this time. The frame itself was bending. The remaining good wheel was cracked, and the whole thing wobbled dangerously whenever weight shifted on it. That night, Adaeze made a decision that surprised even herself. She had been saving money, slowly, carefully for 2 years, to buy a second sewing machine. It was her dream to expand her small shop, to take on more customers, to finally have enough income to stop worrying every single month about rent. She had almost 80,000 naira saved, money she had sacrificed so much for, skipping meals, walking instead of taking buses, mending her own clothes instead of buying new ones. She looked at that money in her small metal box that night, and she looked at the thought of Adaeze sitting helpless in the rain, and something inside her chest made the decision before her mind could argue with it. The next morning, she did not open her shop on time. Instead, she went to the market and found a man who repaired wheelchairs and mobility equipment. She brought Adaeze there herself, pushing the broken wheelchair the entire distance because it could no longer move on its own wheels. "How much to fix this properly?" "New wheels, new brakes, everything that's broken," she asked the repairman. He looked over the chair and named a price that made her stomach drop. It was almost exactly what she had saved. "If I do this," she thought, "I lose my second machine. I lose 2 years of sacrifice. Things are already hard, but I cannot watch this man suffer when I have a way to help him." "Fix it," she said. "Please fix it properly, like new." Adaeze, sitting nearby, had heard the price. His eyes widened. "My daughter, no. That is too much. That is your money for your shop. I have heard you speak of it before." "Baba," Adaeze said, kneeling beside him so their eyes were level. "What good is a bigger shop to me if I can sleep at night knowing I let an old man suffer in the rain when I could have helped? My mother used to say the hand that gives will never truly be empty. I believe her." Adaeze's eyes filled with tears, the kind of tears that come from a place deeper than gratitude. He reached out and held her hand. "You don't know what you have just done," he said softly. "You don't know." Adaeze didn't understand what he meant by that, not then. She simply smiled, paid the repairman everything she had saved, and waited 3 hours while the wheelchair was completely restored. New wheels that wouldn't wobble. New brakes that actually worked. A repaired seat that no longer had torn leather digging into his back. When Adaeze rolled out of that repair shop, smooth and steady for what was probably the first time in years, he wept openly in the street, not caring who saw him. "Thank you," he kept repeating. "Thank you, thank you." "You're welcome, Baba," Adaeze said, though her own heart was heavy knowing what this meant for her dream of expanding the shop. But watching him move freely, watching the relief on his face, she found that the heaviness was mixed with something warm too, a kind of peace she couldn't fully explain. When she returned to her shop late that day, Patience was furious. "You actually did it," Patience said, arms crossed. "You spent everything on that man's wheelchair." 2 years of saving gone just like that. Adaeze, are you out of your mind? It's done, Patience. I don't regret it. You will regret it when rent is due and you have nothing, Patience snapped. Mr. Okonji does not accept excuses, you know this. Patience's words turned out to be more accurate than either of them expected. 3 weeks later, when rent was due, Adaeze had nothing left to cover it. Her shop's income that month had been slower than usual, and without her savings as a cushion, she found herself short by a significant amount. Mr. Okonji, the landlord, did not wait politely. He came to her shop in the middle of the afternoon in front of customers and neighbors and demanded his money loudly. Where's my rent, Adaeze? You think I run a charity here? You think because you are a small girl with a small shop I will just wait forever? Please, sir, give me 1 more week. Business has been slow, but I will have it, I promise. I have heard that before, Mr. Okonji said, his voice rising, drawing the attention of everyone on the street. You people think landlords don't have bills too. You will pay by Friday, or your things will be outside on the street for everyone to see. Let's see how your customers feel sewing clothes for a homeless tailor. The humiliation burned through Adaeze's chest as she stood there, customers watching, neighbors whispering, Patience standing in the doorway with an expression that was somewhere between sympathy and, I told you so. Adaeze said nothing in response, just nodded and looked down, her dignity the only thing she had left to hold on to in that moment. That night, alone in her thin-walled room, with rain tapping against her zinc roof, Adaeze sat on her bed and allowed herself finally to cry. Not loudly, just quiet tears, the kind that come from exhaustion more than sadness, the kind that ask a silent question, did I make the wrong choice? She thought about Baba Easy's smile when his wheelchair finally moved smoothly. She thought about the warmth in his eyes, and even in her fear about Friday's deadline, even in the heaviness of possibly losing the only shelter she had, she found she still could not regret what she had done. If I lose everything, she whispered to herself in the dark. At least I lost it doing something good. She did not know that. 3 streets away, in a house far larger than anything she had ever lived in, a conversation was happening that would change the direction of her entire life. For 2 years, Senator Chidi Maduka had been searching for his father. It was not a story he told publicly. The newspapers knew him as a rising political figure, a man known for infrastructure projects and education funding in his state. What they didn't know was that 2 years earlier, his father, Engineer Adaeze Maduka, once a respected and wealthy businessman, had lost everything in a single catastrophic business deal. A partner had betrayed him, forged signatures, and disappeared with funds that brought down not just a company, but an entire family's reputation and finances. Adaeze Maduka, broken by shame, had refused to accept help from his son, even when Chidi begged him. I built this family up and I tore it down with my own hands, the old man had said the last time they spoke. I will not let my failure hang around your neck while you try to build your career. Let me go, Chidi. Let your mother's memory rest. I will find my own way. And then one morning he simply disappeared. Chidi had hired private investigators. He had searched hospitals, shelters, even mortuaries, terrified of the worst. He had quietly, without public attention, spent 2 years searching every corner of the state for any sign of his father, the proud engineer who could not bear to be seen as a failure by the people he loved. That Tuesday morning, an investigator Chidi had hired months earlier, who had been following leads in increasingly obscure parts of the city, called with unusual urgency in his voice. Senator, I think we found him. There's an elderly man matching his description near the Central Market bus stop. He's been seen there for almost a year, but here's the strange part, sir. Someone has been helping him. A young woman, a tailor. Witnesses say she gave up her own savings recently to repair his wheelchair. Chidi's hands trembled as he listened. Are you certain it's him? 80% certain, sir, based on the description and age. We need someone to confirm in person. Chidi did not wait for full confirmation. He got into his car himself, accompanied by his security detail, and drove straight to that bus stop. When he arrived and saw the elderly man sitting quietly under a tree, in a wheelchair that looked surprisingly well maintained for someone living on the streets, Chidi felt his entire body go still. It was him, older, thinner, his hair completely gray now, but it was unmistakably his father. Papa, Chidi said, his voice breaking as he knelt down in front of the wheelchair. ignoring his security detail, ignoring the small crowd that had begun to gather, ignoring everything except the man in front of him. Adaeze Maduka looked up, and for a moment shock paralyzed his face completely. Then his eyes filled with tears. "Chidi," he whispered. "My son, you should not have come looking. I told you to let me go. Papa, I have searched for you for 2 years. 2 years. Do you know what that has done to me? To not know if my own father was alive or dead? I was ashamed," the old man said, his voice cracking. "I destroyed everything we built. I could not look you in the eyes. You are my father," Chidi said firmly, taking his father's frail hands in his own. "Money can be rebuilt. A business can be rebuilt. But I only have one father, and I almost lost him to pride." They stayed like that for several minutes, father and son, reunited after 2 years of silence and searching, while the small crowd watched in stunned silence, slowly realizing that the elderly man they had walked past every day was connected to one of the most powerful men in their state. When Chidi finally composed himself enough to speak again, he asked the question that had been pulling at him since the investigator's call. "Papa, who has been taking care of you?" The investigator mentioned a young woman. Adaeze Maduka's face softened in a way Chidi had not seen since before the business collapse. "Her name is Adaeze," he said. "She owns a small tailoring shop nearby. For almost a year she has shared her food with me every single morning, without ever asking who I was or what I could offer her in return. And 3 weeks ago, son, she spent every single naira she had saved. 2 years of her savings meant for her own shop's growth, to repair this wheelchair so that I would not suffer in the rain." Chidi's jaw tightened with a mixture of disbelief and overwhelming gratitude. "She doesn't know who you are?" "She has never asked," the old man said. "She helped me because I was a human being in front of her, not because she expected anything in return." "Where is her shop, Papa?" "I need to see her. I need to thank her properly." It was Adaeze who insisted they wait one more day, wanting to gather himself, wanting to plan how to properly honor a kindness that had restored not just his physical comfort, but something deeper, his belief that goodness still existed in a world that had broken him so badly. That evening, as Adaeze closed her shop, worried about Friday's deadline, unaware that the man she had been quietly feeding was the father of one of the most influential senators in the state, Chidi sat with his father, listening to every detail of Adaeze's kindness, his respect for this stranger growing with every story his father told. "She told me once," Adaeze said, smiling faintly at the memory, "that her mother used to say the hand that gives, even from little, will never truly be empty. I have thought about that phrase every single day since she said it to me." The next morning, Friday, the deadline Mr. Okonji had set, arrived with a heaviness that sat on Adaeze's chest from the moment she woke up. She had managed to gather a small portion of the rent from selling some fabric scraps and doing a rush sewing job overnight, but it was still far short of what she owed. She walked to her shop slowly, mentally preparing herself for the humiliation that was likely waiting for her, for the possibility that Mr. Okonji would carry out his threat and place her belongings outside for the entire street to witness. She did not expect what actually happened. As she turned onto her street, she saw the convoy. 3 black SUVs parked directly in front of her shop, men in dark suits standing near the vehicles, and a small crowd already gathering, whispering, pointing. Her heart dropped. Her first thought was fear, the kind of fear poor people learn to carry instinctively when powerful-looking strangers show up unannounced. Had something happened? Was she in some kind of trouble she didn't understand? One of the men in suits noticed her approaching and walked toward her. "Are you Adaeze, the tailor who fixed an old man's wheelchair?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. "Yes, sir. Is something wrong?" "No," the man said, and for the first time his stern expression softened into something almost warm. "Nothing is wrong. Senator Maduka would like to speak with you." Before she could fully process those words, the door of the middle SUV opened and Baba Adaeze, her Baba Adaeze, the man she had fed every morning for nearly a year, rolled out in his wheelchair, the same wheelchair she had spent her entire savings to repair. Beside him stood a tall, well-dressed man whose face she recognized vaguely from posters around town, a face she had never connected to the quiet old man at the bus stop. "Baba," Adaeze said, confusion written across her face. "What is happening? Who are these people?" Adaeze Maduka smiled at her, The same warm smile she had grown accustomed to over the past year, except now there was something else in his eyes. A kind of pride and gratitude too large to fully contain. "My daughter," he said gently, "I owe you the truth I have kept hidden for too long. My name is Adaeze Maduka. I was once a businessman before pride and a broken heart led me to disappear from my family. This is my son, Senator Chidi Maduka. He has been searching for me for 2 years." Adaeze's hand flew to her mouth, the pieces slowly clicking into place, her mind struggling to reconcile the quiet, lonely old man at the bus stop with the father of one of the state's most powerful politicians. Senator Chidi stepped forward, extending his hand toward her, though his eyes were full of an emotion that went beyond formal gratitude. "Adaeze, I don't know how to properly thank you. For almost a year, you fed my father when the rest of the world walked past him. 3 weeks ago, you gave up everything you had saved to make sure he was comfortable, safe from the rain, able to move with dignity. You did not know who he was. You did not ask what you would gain. You simply saw a person who needed help and you helped him." Tears began forming in Adaeze's eyes, overwhelmed not by the wealth in front of her, but by the realization that the connection she had built with Baba Ease had been real, regardless of who he turned out to be. "I didn't do it for any reward," she said quietly. "I just couldn't watch him suffer." "I know," Chidi said, his voice thick with emotion. "That is exactly why what you did matters so much." At that moment, a familiar figure pushed through the gathering crowd, his face pale with sudden recognition and dawning panic. "Mr. Okanji, the landlord.